Wow, what a beautiful piece of these things are. Does that actually impress anyone? Like, who cares? As you're driving along just going, oh, stop it, stop it.
Look, as you probably know, Land Rover and Range Rover, whatever you want to call it, they often feature at the wrong end of reliability and dependability surveys. Is the Velar any different? Of course not.
This thing is still wonderful to drive. It makes you feel special as you kind of waft down the road. Okay, look, we've all got that friend, or maybe even you've been in this scenario where a relationship starts with someone that is incredibly attractive. And initially it all seems all very, very impressive and very nice. But then as time goes on, you start to learn that that very attractive person is actually possibly quite mad and riddled with issues. Can the same be said for the Range Rover Velar? Look, there's no doubt it is an absolutely stunning vehicle. In fact, it was actually named the world's most beautiful car in 2018. But Range Rover, as a brand, regularly populates the nasty end of countless reliability and customer satisfaction surveys. So how about we attempt to look past the sexy good looks and the whole brand name appeal kind of stuff and work out once and for all if a Velar is actually a vehicle of genuine quality, or are its talents purely skin deep? Take the clever Poppy Addy door handle thing, for example. Obviously, when they're closed in, it's all very nice. It smooths out the entire side design of the car. But talk about taking something that should be simple and intuitive to use and just ruining it. See, plenty of owners have had issues where the door handle refuses to go back into its home, or worst case scenario, it refuses to come out of its home, to the point that one owner we spoke to mentioned that these all failed on the car and the only way she could get into the car was via the boot. Classy. Now, to fix this issue, chances are it just requires a bit of lubricant. That's easy. Although there are more and more reports of the mechanism itself starting to fail. Actually, here's an idea, Range Rover. Rather than making something overcomplicated, why not just put normal door handles on the bloody thing? And before anyone jumps in the comments going, oh no, it's there because of aerodynamic efficiency, I call complete bullshit on that. If the designers can design such a beautiful entire car, surely they can take a normal door handle and make that look sexy and aero efficient as well. Now, next up, the ride quality should be smoother than a George Clooney pickup line. In fact, for models with air suspension, it can feel like the road is actually made of clouds. If not, that can be, let's say, not a great sign. Actually, in saying that though, models fitted with the larger wheel options, they can have a bit of a detrimental effect on the ride quality too. But for the models fitted with air suspension, look, like any car fitted with air suspension, it's probably going to fail eventually. And then for the models with the non-air suspension, they're the electronically controlled dampers. There are plenty of reports that these can wear prematurely. Actually, so can the bushes for both the air suspension and normal suspension models. And also the brakes. Apparently they can wear prematurely too. Annoyingly though, the cost of some of the OEM replacement parts can be ridiculous. Take these headlights for example. Some owners have been quoted in excess of $8,000 each to replace them. They've needed to find out how much to replace them because the DRLs inside them can flicker and eventually fail. But because it's a sealed unit, you can't actually fix it, you just have to replace the entire headlight cluster. But do your homework on any of these replacement parts, because plenty of owners highly recommend fitting quality aftermarket parts. Often they'll outperform, outlast, and cost less than the OEM items. Actually, a perfect example of this are the wiper blades. The OEM wiper blades are way too expensive and, according to the owners, can be a bit shit and they just don't last. Instead, just get a set of WiperTech wiper blades by hitting the link down below. You're gonna get 15% off and free express shipping. They're gonna be cheaper than the OEM ones, they last longer and they wipe better. But look, if you're a Land Rover, Range Rover fan or you work for the company, can you please let us know in the comments why some of these parts are so expensive? I mean, it's not like they're superior to any of the parts that you'll find on a Mazda or a Subaru. In fact, some of these parts, as you'll see in this video, are possibly inferior to them. So why do they cost so much money? Speaking of inferior, let's have a chat about the absolutely stunning to look at, yet completely flawed infotainment and HVAC screen arrangement thing going on here. Now look, when perfectly clean and working correctly, it is a really impressive system and it does look fabulous. Especially on the more recent update models like in 2023, but especially for 2024 when this whole system received a massive overhaul. Still, I don't think it's as good as BMW's iDrive system or the infotainment setup in the Genesis GV70 and GV80. And look, that's because thanks to the lack of physical buttons on here, short of these three, which I'm going to be honest with you, these just feel a bit cheap and nasty. nasty for me, but like the stupid door handle arrangement, actually using this can be way more of a faff than it needs to be, especially when you're driving. And the same can be said for the lack of buttons on the steering wheel as well. Look, it's all very impressive that these are all sort of multifunctional sorts of things, but again, it's just way more of a challenge to use than it should be. Also, thanks to the panoramic roof, if the sun hits this at the wrong time of day, which is really any time the sun is out, these just turn into mirrors. It's almost like when annoying people try to bounce the sunlight off their watch into your eyes, you're driving along just going, oh, stop it, stop it. Also, if you're covered in flesh, like the majority of humans out there, the moment you use these screens, they're instantly covered in fingerprints and filth, and they just look nasty in no time. And this is all especially apparent when the screens are off, which can sometimes happen even when you want the screens to be on. See, there are so many complaints with this entire system. Screens locking up or going completely blank, or when they are working they can flicker, or the whole system is just incredibly slow to respond. Also, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto and Bluetooth connections, they can drop out randomly, or again, they're just super slow to connect. And then there are reports that the camera image can just stay on the screen constantly until you turn the car off and restart it again, and then it kind of goes back to normal. Actually, restarting the car is a pretty common way of solving a lot of these infotainment and HVAC issues. Other times it can require a software update, but just pray you don't need to replace any actual hardware components, because we found reports when researching this of some repairs costing anywhere from $1,500 all the way through to $7,000 and even more, depending on what needs to be fixed. Also, a hot tip, when you're test driving one of these, obviously try every single function that you possibly can. Also, do that when you're driving, but then pull over, turn the car off, lock it, then unlock it, then restart the car again and see if all of the functions work all over again. Because quite often, this kind of normal driving procedure is enough to freak the entire thing out. Obviously, this is based on the car being able to lock and unlock itself in the first place, because plenty of owners are starting to complain that the door lock mechanisms are beginning to fail. See, there are plenty of reports popping up that the car can just be impossible to lock or unlock no matter what you try. Or sometimes it will just unlock itself randomly. Or other times, the car will get confused when it's trying to unlock itself and it just sets the alarm off. And look, obviously all this suggests that these cars can have, some electronic issues. Actually, with the Velar, yeah, it can have them in spades. Look, basically, everything on and in the vehicle that has electricity attached to it has complaints also attached to them. Everything can fail. There are so many things going on here that we simply don't have time to take you through them all in this video, but they can range from small annoying things like the power folding mirrors not power folding, or the interior lighting playing up, or the powered tailgate failing to the point that you have to force it open and closed, or the car can have just a massive electronic tantrum to the point that it just refuses to operate at all. That can also happen when the cool gear selector knob thing comes rising up out of the center console, almost like the microphone at the Academy Awards. Sometimes it doesn't rise to the occasion, or sometimes you can't actually select the gear, and this leaves the car completely stranded, which is probably why Range Rover replaced this in 2021 and just swapped it out for a normal gear selector. But that's not the only complaint with the gearboxes. There are plenty of reports from owners that when they're changing gears, they can get really clunky, or the whole thing gets juddery, or it just sort of gets lost between gears and doesn't know what to do. There are also reports of some overheating issues and mechanical problems with the transmissions, but Jim, our resident mechanic, will take us through that shortly. Now, the Velar is one of the lower selling Land Rover Range Rover models, so you would assume that they would have simplified the range, right? So it makes sense and it's easy to kind of work out what's what. No, of course they didn't do that. Have a guess how many different Velar models have been on sale in Australia? Say a dozen? 20 would be way too many, right? 81. There were 81 different models of Velar. Why? Do you want to see what that looks like? Here you go. And also, imagine if they'd spent all the time that they did on coming up with different variants and models on, build quality and reliability. These could have been awesome. And it's not like we're talking 81 models based on 2 or 3 engines in various states of tune. There have been 4 different diesel engines, 5 different petrol engines, and with a couple of those having hybrid arrangements attached too. And predictably, they can all have their own range of issues, but again, Jim will get into all that sort of stuff soon. However, the bad news unfortunately doesn't end there. Obviously, this interior is utterly beautiful. It's very comfortable, great levels of adjustment. It's a really nice place to be, and in this one, it even smells a bit expensive. However, that sense of premium that you should get, which obviously increases the higher up the Velar food chain you go, that sense of premium can be undone when bits of trim just start falling off, or anything plastic just kind of wears out easily, or the leathers, they can all sort of wear prematurely as well. Actually, according to the owners, these interiors are not renowned for their resilience. And the quality of the paint and the panel gaps all over the car could be a bit underwhelming for a car that's supposed to be in this sort of premium end of the market. Actually, when we were researching this, we found multiple pictures and videos of press vehicles where some of the panel gaps on the doors just don't quite line up correctly. Oh, also on this one, apparently these sort of rose gold colored bits of plastic, apparently that's supposed to be impressive. Does that actually impress anyone? Like, who cares? Actually, also on some of the plastic components, like the interior trim, there are reports that a lot of the plastic exterior trim pieces can come a little bit loose, and also any of the black plastic, there are reports that it can fade as well. And this can also lead to rattles and squeaks when you're driving. And you know what, this is actually something we found when we reviewed the BMW X5 and the Mercedes-Benz GLE and the Audi Q7. The interiors can give you this sense of, premium quality, almost luxury, but then the plastics behind the scenes, they all become brittle over time, and it's almost like they go on protest and they start making way too much noise. Really detracts from any kind of premium essence that these cars can have. But then in the Velar, these can also have an issue where it feels like the power steering leaves the chat and you're left kind of fighting with the steering wheel to go anywhere. It can be really dangerous, which is why this has had a recall in many countries. But you've got to ask yourself, how does this even happen in the first place? It just shouldn't. Now, it's at this point of the video that you're probably thinking, wow, what a beautiful piece of shit these things are. But we need to make this abundantly clear. When you research through the owners groups and forums and subreddits, you're going to find countless positive reports from owners that are completely satisfied with their Velar, and they state that it's arguably the best car they've ever owned. Even when it comes to this actual car, it has a perfect history. There are no complaints about it whatsoever, and chances are any Velar you look at is probably going to be the same as this. And look, obviously Land Rover as a brand have a terrible reputation when it comes to build quality and reliability. But then in saying that, in various customer satisfaction and reliability surveys, the Velar doesn't do too badly. So maybe it's just the best of a really bad bunch. But it is still an SUV, so how is it in terms of the daily duties and practicality? Well, good news first, the boot is massive for the size of the car. And that's where the good news ends, because it's downhill from here. So the seats fold forward and kind of more than flat. The problem we have here, you now have a lip, like a low lip kind of thing, but on this side. So when you slide something in, chances are it's going to get stuck in here, but then because of this distance, to reach in to get it's going to be a massive nightmare. Also, in this particular model, there are no pulls or buttons to fold the seats flat. There are some base model Suzuki SUVs that have, rear seat pulls in the boot, but not in a Velar. And then, look at the height of the cargo area here. Look, if you've got a forklift with you at all times, maybe you're towing it, that'll be fine, but this is ridiculous. If you've got anything heavy, you've got to lift it up and into the car. Now, on models with air suspension, you can lower this, but this one doesn't have air suspension, so you're left with this height. Stupid. Now, on the subject of being extremely good looking, yet maybe lacking in a bit of talent and quality, I'm exactly 15 centimeters taller than Megan Fox. This is in my driving position, and in terms of space, quite good. Good amount of knee room here. Interesting amount of foot room. So I can get my feet under the seats, but the actual, let's say the aperture down there is quite narrow due to the seat rail, so my feet are kind of close in together. But like the front, the rear seats aren't that comfortable. They're not bad, but again, in a car, in this kind of neck of the woods in terms of the categories of car, I just feel like both the front and the rear seats should be just the most comfortable seats and supportive, and they're just not. Granted, it does feel like these rear seats have never ever been sat in, so maybe with a bit more bum time, they'll get a bit more squishy and supportive, but at the moment, not great. Then as far as features and practicality, in the back of this one, you've got your own air vents, you've got power outlet here, you've got sections here that would have things there if this car was optioned or higher up the food chain. You have door bins you can actually get to if you have legs, yet they are hard, scratchy plastics down there, although that's probably good for resilience. That's going to collect all kind of filth from your kids. Pull down armrest with 2.5 cup holders, again, spot for your small pretentious coffee in the back there. That's about it. No air vents. Oh, flippy floppy, pockets on the backs of the seats. That's about it. And then up front, considering the size of this vehicle, I don't think it's a really smart or intelligent use of space in terms of places for all of your crap. Like, glove box isn't very large. There is a spot behind the screens here. That's specifically for things that you want to lose forever and forget they're there in the first place. There's a little cup holder under this little flappy door that's probably going to scratch up anyway. Also, that does hold a small pretentious coffee. I had a ristretto on oat milk yesterday and it was fitted perfectly. Another cup holder here, square one there. No idea what that's for. Okay sized door bins, but hard scratchy plastics behind it. This is going to collect all sorts of filth. Nowhere for sunglasses up here. There's nothing under here. There's nothing under the seats. There's nothing kind of down here. And then we get to these under the armrest, and these are adjustable like this. But in this car, ready? You've got to remember, I am incredibly strong. I'm a very masculine man, and yet it's like, that is a hell of a tricep workout. You have storage under here, which is felt lined, and some USB inputs and power outlets, all that sort of stuff, but it's ridiculous. And then when it comes to safety features and tech and equipment, look, safety features first. It's awesome that even the early base models come loaded with stuff, although there are some complaints about the safety features. We'll get to that in a second. In terms of tech and equipment, let's say that they're relatively well equipped in the base models. Look, in saying that, these still do come loaded with everything you're really ever going to need. In fact, way too many things to take you through in this video. We'd be here for bloody days. But if you want the really notable kind of features and tech, well, you are going to have to climb higher up the Velar food chain or find an example that has been heavily optioned. The problem is, though, a lot of the features that are only available in the higher specs or as optional extras in these are just standard kit on things like a Kia Sorento or a Hyundai Santa Fe or a Lexus RX or a Genesis GV70. I again feel like it's Land Rover, Range Rover trying to convince you that this is some kind of special premium vehicle when it kind of isn't. Actually, you know what? The more we researched the Velar, the more we realized that this is a great example of just because it's wearing a premium badge does not mean it's a premium car at all. I mean, we featured other cars that around the same era as this that cost tens and tens of thousands of dollars less, yet they have superior build quality, better fit and finish, they come with more standard features, and they're just more resilient at being a car. And plenty of those cars can also be just as nice to drive as one of these. Look, don't get me wrong, this thing is still wonderful to drive. It does everything a vehicle in this class should. It makes you feel special as you kind of waft down the road. But then again, so does pretty much every other car in this category. The Velar is certainly no standout at all. And look, it's great that these things have some genuine off-roading chops. We're not obviously talking, kind of Jeep Wrangler levels of ability here, but thanks to some incredibly clever terrain response technology and equipment, these things can pull shapes off-road that you wouldn't believe. Although in saying that, I do wonder what percentage of Velar have ever been taken off-road? Surely it's got to be in the single digits, right? But look, considering the image that these come with and how they're sold to us, I honestly was expecting way more from this driving experience. I mean, even when it comes to some of the safety tech, and this is a big complaint from owners, the lane keep assist has to be some of the most aggressive I've ever experienced, and the adaptive cruise control, it feels like a learner driver is in control of the brake pedal. Last night I was coming home on the freeway and the thing's just like jumping on the anchors all the time. Even the adaptive high beam tech, it can get confused so easily. Honestly, it can feel like it's trying to put on a strobe lighting effect rather than just light the road ahead. All of this stuff just detracts from the whole premium essence of the car. And then there are just some flaws that I think are just fundamental with the car. Like, the vision out of this isn't great. It can be really hard to judge the extremities of the entire vehicle, so parking it is more of a challenge than it needs to be. And also, it doesn't really hide its size and weight at all. It feels big and heavy to drive. Look, overall, I know this all sounds really harsh, but it is actually an okay thing to drive, I suppose. If you haven't driven many other vehicles, this will all be very impressive, but I'm really let down. This is just pretty underwhelming. As a driving experience, it's just meh. But we haven't even got into the potential mechanical issues these things can suffer from. I'd love to elaborate on that, but I can't because I'm not a qualified mechanic. Luckily, Jim certainly is.
I'll start with the 2-litre petrol 4-cylinder. They have a fairly complicated timing chain and a valve train arrangement, which is actually this engine's Achilles heel, basically, a few issues there. They do suffer from stretched timing chains and broken timing chain guides. Look, they do, but it's nowhere near as common as the 4-cylinder diesel, which I'll get to in a minute. The cooling systems on these, it is rather complicated, a lot of plastic components, so you're likely to see a lot of leaks and complications there too. The 6-cylinder petrol, look, it has a electronic supercharger or turbo, whatever you want to call it, as part of its hybrid system. Look, that is a completely unrebuildable component, unlike a typical conventional turbo. When it fails, and they are failing, that can be between 5 and 6 grand to have one of those replaced. So yeah, very expensive. Just to clarify that, what that is, it's like a turbocharger, but it's driven by an electric motor rather than exhaust gases. This engine also has a very complex cooling system, which is prone to problems. The timing chains on these are improved over the 4-cylinder petrol, but still occasionally problematic. And look, the complexity of the hybrid system, although not really a huge weak point now, I would wager in years to come will be a huge pain in your ass. Now, the V6 petrol with the supercharger, it is potentially the least unreliable option here. Now, a fun fact, and I've talked about this before, the engine block, the casting in this 6-cylinder is actually the casting they use in the V8, which just have the back 2 cylinders blanked off, which some say cost effective and engineering genius. I just say it's cheap. These do have occasional timing chain issues, although unlikely to cause you a catastrophic engine failure like the 4-cylinder diesel, which I'll get to in a minute. It will often give you plenty of warning and just start rattling, and then you can get it repaired, but typically no catastrophic engine failures. Actually, we'll go with less likely to have a catastrophic failure. The supercharger drive coupling can fail sometimes, as can the superdriver coupling bearing, and you'll hear that whining and carrying on. It's relatively inexpensive and easy to fix. And again, the cooling system on these is rather fragile, a lot of plastic components there, which you'll have to keep on top of. The most likely issue you'll see on that cooling system is the expansion tank. They just often split and leak. Now, the diesels, I'll start with the 4-cylinder. It is by far the worst offender here. I'm going to go so far as to calling it an absolute piece of shit. The timing chains, that is the worst of the worst here. They are prone to stretching and spontaneously breaking, and the guides can wear as well. There's a few compounding factors here. These engines are also known for their oil dilution issues, and some blame the timing chains on the oil dilution issues. When that oil loses its quality, basically, the chains just wear and stretch, and then they have a catastrophic engine failure. If you catch it before the engine does fail, you can replace the chains, but conveniently they're located at the back of the engine. Now, to access them, you have to drop the whole engine and gearbox and subframe, and it's a 2-day job, and it's eye-wateringly expensive. And sometimes they're failing with as little as 80,000 kilometers on the clock. The 6-cylinder diesels, they do have issues with their timing chains, but nowhere near as common as the 4-cylinder. Both the 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder have issues with their EGR valves and their EGR coolers. They have a filter, like a gauze, that's in the EGR system, which is an insane place to have a filter because they clog up. And they don't make it easy to change. You've got to pull half the engine bay apart to get at it. Pretty common problem. And often that filter will be clogged up with pieces of diesel particulate filter as well, which these DPFs are prone to have problems as well. But like I always say, don't instantly throw the DPF under the bus. It may be a result of a boost leak or a failed map sensor or a secondary problem. The AdBlue system on these is another common problem as well. You can expect to see issues there. Now, these things have plastic inlet manifolds, and the swirl flap actuator often fails, and sometimes that manifold also just leaks as well. Now, it's likely that the first owners of these vehicles probably only had them serviced every 20 or 30,000 kilometers, which in some cases is the recommended service interval. So the owners think they're doing the right thing. And as far as things like premature timing chain wear goes, by the time they get up to maybe 80 or 100,000 kilometers, the damage is already done. So if you own one and you want it to last, or you have a social conscience and you don't want to stitch up the second and third owners of these, just change the bloody oil and do it every 10,000 Ks. Now, that won't completely mitigate all the problems you're likely to have, and if you own one of these, it is going to spend a considerable time of its life in workshops getting fixed, but still, it's a good thing to do.
No matter if you're shopping for aftermarket brake parts or suspension or infotainment systems or speakers or dash cams, car care, full drive accessories, Automotive Superstore carry over 400,000 different parts and accessories. Simply type in your rego and the site will filter down to the parts that are perfectly suited for your car. Okay then, so mechanically it can be a bit of a nightmare. Build quality is, let's say, hit and miss. It can be lacking in features and equipment compared to the competition, and aside from the stunning good looks, it's a bit average. Plus, with pricing ranging from $30,000 to $150,000, unless you're happy to hemorrhage some cash, some of the financial realities of this thing can be quite confronting too. The Velar generally depreciates substantially faster than many competing SUVs from BMW, Genesis and Lexus, and even more quickly than other Land Rover models such as the Defender or the full-fat Range Rover. Add to that the ridiculous premiums asked for parts and maintenance, and we're not really sure why you'd risk buying one. Look, if the looks and brand appeal are a major priority for you, I guess that's sort of a valid reason to buy a car, fine. Thousands of owners have proven that the right Velar might be the right car for you. But the owners groups and forums are also filled with plenty of stories from unhappy owners that haven't been so lucky. But look at it this way, at least when you're stranded by the side of the road, you can just stand back and appreciate what a beautiful piece of static art the Velar can become. As a sculpture, absolutely wonderful. As a car, yeah, not that special. Oh, if you'd also like to see what other SUVs we don't think you should buy, go and check this video out. But if you do want a Velar and you live in Sydney, this one's for sale at Lexus Chatswood. Go and have a chat to them. But you've been warned. But then again, look at it this way. At least when you're stranded by the side of the road, you can take a break and look, slow down, static art piece of a Velar.